World Financial Group offers entrepreneurs from all backgrounds the opportunity to start their own business on a level playing field. Dr. Yana Woodhouse, receiving the WCM Wall Street Pioneer Award by the United Black Wall Street of America, Inc., is one of those entrepreneurs.
I see WFG and TFA as a place where African Americans with an entrepreneurial mindset can flourish. And the bonus, we help families and serve the communities across the country.
To learn more about us, go to worldfinancialgroup.com.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. I believe this is our first show for the new season, so I'm glad that I have been able to make the cut for the new year, and if you're looking at this or listening to this, so have you. So congratulations and be blessed. I have today a person that, wow, we talk about the first Harlem Renaissance that had some inspiration to this next gentleman, but when we talk about the second Harlem Renaissance, which based on the Harlem Week, which started 50 years ago, almost going on 51 now, the second Harlem Renaissance started in 1974 in Harlem. But the brother that I'm going to introduce you to is definitely part of the second Harlem Renaissance. He's a writer, a musician, has over 30 books dealing with poetry and other different types of essays. He's interviewed major entities. A lot of his work has been controversial based on who is reading it. He does music. He has a piece out that we'll probably talk a little bit about Nikki Giovanni, who was a friend. He's been part of, in the California, that Black Arts movement, similar to Roger Furman and the Black Arts movement in Harlem. Ishmael was part of that, even though a lot of his work was also in the village too, where a lot of black art and poetry took place. So I would take the rest of the show to talk about his credits and all of the things that he's done, but he has a play coming up, which is exciting to me because of the character Shine. We'll talk a little bit about that. Those who are a little seasoned in years may know a little bit about the Shine legacy, but nevertheless, please welcome Mr. Well, you know, it's funny because we've gotten away from saying Mr. and ma'am and all of those things, but Brother Ishmael Reed is a brother that I have, based on just reading his stuff, I'm quite honored to welcome Mr. Reed to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Tony.
Man, the more I read about you, the more I said, damn, how did he do all of that stuff? you know, and still doing it. That's the inspiration that I have, and hopefully many of the young people or the middle-aged people or the older people who hear this interview or see you will be inspired by the stuff that you've done. But tell us a little bit about who you are and what has led you on this path, and we'll do that first. Uh, Even though there's so much to that's another show too. But we'll do some of that, some of the highlights, and then we'll lead up to your new project that's coming up soon.
Well, I think I'm getting an echo. I think that I would begin with my first publication for a newspaper called The Empire Star. So when I was 16, the publisher of the Star, A.J. Smitherman, took a chance on my work, and I did not realize at the time that he was a hero of Tulsa, Oklahoma uprising,
Mm.
1921. He was a crusading newspaper man. He had a newspaper called the Tulsa Star, and before that, he had the Muskogee Star, where he intervened when some of the white settlers were trying to declare Native American kids as orphans so they could receive oil revenue. I think they just made a movie about this.
Yeah, it was a movie about that.
But he was the one who was a catalyst in getting the money to Native Americans and blacks.
Right.
Then he went to Tulsa, and he was the key member, one of the key members of the Black Wall Street in Harlem, excuse me, in Tulsa.
Right.
And he crusaded against lynching. I mean, not only did he talk about uh, being opposed to lynching, but he armed Black World War I veterans would interrupt lynchings
Mm-hmm.
using their arms. And at one point, he interrupted a lynching single-handedly by threatening the mob with a bomb he said he had in his case, and there was no such bomb. So the guy had guts. And when some citizens of one town, white citizens of one town, offended a black person, he got the governor to bring them all to justice, including the mayor of the town. So he's what you might call a bad black man. I would say something else, but he was bad. What happened was that there was a young man named Dick Rowland, a teenager, and he inadvertently bumped into a white girl on the elevator, and she screamed. And somebody who heard her scream interpreted the whole thing the wrong way and thought this was kind of a assault. She told the police that it was inadvertent. She even said it was an accident. And it turns out that they might have been lovers, okay, because she supposedly followed him when he left Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
So the newspaper, as usual, to this day,
To this day, yeah.
riled up the mob, said there was going to be a lynching. Nobody even talked about a lynching. A Negro to be lynched. So the mob gathered in front of the courthouse, and Smitherman and his men offered to help the sheriff turn back the mob. And what happened was they went down to the courthouse, and a white person tried to take a gun from one of these World War I veterans. A shot was fired, and it was on. Now, if you look at the documentaries, they portray the black people as victims of this mob. They were overrun by the mob. They fought back. They leave that out. And fortunately, A.J. Smitherman, who was also a poet and a writer of poetry, wrote a poem in which he presented the resistor side of the case, where they said they took casualties. I mean, they were mowing people down, and they had to throw the whole state, the whole full power of the state against them to defeat them. Like I compare it to the Ukrainians and the Russians.
Yeah, they had
They were
airplanes
outgunned.
dropping
Yeah, they
bombs
were
and all
attacked
of
by
that
the
stuff.
air. They were attacked by the air, and as a result, 300 people were killed. And they're still finding graves. So Smitherman and his family had to flee because he was considered uppity. Like there was a scene where the mob came to his house, and he had a phonograph recording, equipment, and they didn't have that. And the family hid in the basement because they had to be prepared for any eventuality. And so the mob left, and they fled to Boston. And the state of Oklahoma tried to get him to get Boston to return him to Tulsa. Boston refused. Then he came to Buffalo, and he started his newspaper, extended his newspaper experience with the Empire Star. And I was 16. I was working at a drugstore. I come out of the drugstore, and this Packard pulls up, and there's this black guy in a Stetson hat. That should have been a clue. And he says, "I want you to get in here, help me deliver these papers." So in the back of the seat, there was the Afro-American Chicago Defender, and we delivered them to, black people had their own businesses in those days. There's segregation. They had stores, so we delivered the papers, barber shop. So he said, "You can have this job." So I quit my job at the drugstore, whose manager was another mentor. His name was Carl Platter. He was Jewish. He came to the United States when he was 11 years old from Ukraine and built this drugstore empire, actually. And he's the one who founded the Chase Store drugstore. So he always complimented me. He says, you speak up, and these other kids, that I was interested in the Army McCarthy hearings and all that. And, he encouraged me. And both those mentors taught me to be driven. Find something you like and be driven. So after that, my experience at the Empire Star, I went to Paris. We moved to another neighborhood out of the projects. And so I belonged to the YMCA, the Black YMCA, which was designed by John Brent, the great black architect. And these middle-class people, at that time, we had some sort of like what the Chinese have, a government-to-government relationship. So you have the talented 10th, merchants, black merchants, professionals, the clergy, all, and people who are into social work. And I got a picture of all of them I kept for the newspaper. And they dealt with the downtown white establishment in those days. So they took up a collection. I went to Paris. And that changed my life because I met African students who were quite different from the image of Africans in the school curriculum and in popular culture. We thought, I think some of the most sophisticated magazines in those days were printing cartoons of blacks with Africans with
bones in
their nose, and boiling people. And as a matter of fact, Zoltan Hershey, she wrote 2 minstrel shows. Richard Wright accused her of minstrelsy, and the feminists said, "Well, how could you?" Well, she did write 2 minstrel shows, and in one there were jokes about Africans eating people, and even Muhammad Ali. Remember when Muhammad Ali threatened these? He said, "All you critics, when you go to Africa, they're going to put you in a pot, boil you." And the government of Zaire, they said, we do not eat people over here. Just like Trump said. Remember Trump said that helped him win the election, that the Haitians were eating
Mm,
you
yeah.
know, even pets and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I came back. I said, "Wow, I'm dropping out of high school because if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about?" So I dropped out of high school and went to work in the library. Read James Baldwin in the library. It was one of the first authors I'd read because they weren't teaching me black authors, uh, even less in those days than now. So our whole English curriculum was about British authors, not even many American white authors, British authors. They want to anglicize us. And that's still the goal of the American school system is to anglicize everyone and invite everybody to be assimilated into this great Anglo mainstream, as they call it. And because black people have resisted, they're using these underhanded techniques financed by billionaires to close down black culture. So you saw the governor of Florida, not the governor of Florida, the governor of Virginia won the election by dissing Toni Morrison's novel. I don't know how that got lost, but I guess it's because we're not noticed by the media. Issues that affect black people not noticed by the media, but he did win because this Republican woman complained that her son had read Beloved, and she thought it was a degenerate book or whatever. And it turns out she was an operative for the Republican Party. But this guy down there, they were grooming for president, used that novel to get over. Now, how do I explain that to Europeans and Asians? I go to these Chinese universities, and they're puzzled by this. I mean, why would anyone, you know, denigrate Toni Morrison's novel that won the Nobel Prize? So they make us look like backwater hicks all over the world with their attitude. I go to Europe where black literature is taught at universities that were founded before what the Native Americans called the invasion of North America. Before Europeans came over here, I go to a place like the University of Rome where they teach black literature, people that you know. And that university was founded in the 1200s before these people came over here. But we look like really backward people when we have our leaders, not only the yahoos and the magas, but people at our universities. I mean, presidents of university and colleges and universities pushing this stuff, denigrating black literature, and they talk about books they haven't read. They put down books they haven't read. So how do you explain that to the world? When I go to conferences abroad, people from all the world come to conferences that focus on black literature. 1990s, we went to Paris, and people from India and China, other places. I go to these conferences, and I can't explain to them, the attitudes of the American establishment, academic and political, about their attitudes to the black literature. So anyway, that comes to my play. They have been very successful since the integration. And Zora Neale Hurston said that a lot of black teachers would lose their jobs. And so what happens is, I think one of the things that happened with assimilation and integration in schools, and I think, you can have both, you can assimilate, you should preserve your culture. But I think the only thing that black kids have gotten out of this is, our arrest records. I don't know how that issue got lost, but thousands of kids, black kids, have been. I don't know. They had a picture of a 6-year-old who was chained. They chained a 6-year-old black kid. They put the police in the schools, and black kids have to be arrested or, scolded by the police because of truancy or talking back to the teacher. And so what you have are the lack of black teachers, especially black males, in the school classroom. You have people from other cultures who don't know how to deal with this with black students. I was lucky enough to have at least a couple of white teachers who looked out for me, but most of them saw me as a discipline problem. I mean, throughout my grammar school education, I was such a discipline problem. I was ashamed to take my report card home because I
Because
had all these D's.
you were brilliant. Tell me, with what you're saying, how do you feel you were able to not only write over 30 books, but write plays, make music, poetry? What got you into following the arts since you had been so hindered in education from understanding the arts?
Well, I think my stuff is hard for the mainstream readers to take. And I felt that I had to do a multitask. I think that's what Brendan Brooks said. That multi-talented. I don't see myself that way,
Hmm.
but I had to. There were barriers to my being published and having my ideas printed.
Right?
So I had to try a different medium, like plays, uh, novels, poetry. I composed music, and as a matter of fact, I've composed music for Sandra Wilson, Taj Mahal, Macy Gray, some other people, Bobby Womack. Um, I had to find every way possible,
Hmm.
every weapon possible available to me to get over. Otherwise, I would be beholden to the mainstream and write blame the victim books.
Tell us a little bit about your experience in the East Village before you went to California.
Well, we went to the East Village because the rents were cheap. In those days, I paid $60 a month for an apartment, and you could get by on maybe $5 food budget every day. So we eat a lot of conditions, these little concoctions and Ukrainian soup. So I had a lot of Ukrainian soup. It was 25 cents a bowl. So in those days, if you were an artist, you could really survive on very little. And I had odd jobs. I did a lot of odd jobs. I worked in a factory. I worked in a hospital. I worked in market research. And then I would write. And sometimes I would get unemployment, which gave me the time to write. So we also had a great workshop called the Umbra Workshop, which Amiri Baraka says is the source of or the origin of black arts, because we meet every week and we try to outblunt each other, and sometimes there were near fist fights because we were very hard on each other. I mean, maybe too hard, and so I think about 50 or 60 books have come out of that Umbra Workshop. I've written
And some
40.
great writers
Absolutely.
and poets,
Askia
like
Torre,
the Baracas and the
Askia.
Dickies.
Oh, Amiri lived on near the west side. He was not really a member of Umbra, although he gets credit. But there was Lorenzo Thomas, who's a great writer, and Tom Dent. His father was president of Dillard University in Louisiana, and because he had connections with the civil rights movement and some of the stars of the civil rights movement, we come to our workshop at this apartment on Second Street, and there'd be James Meredith or Charlene Humphrey or Dr. King's brother, who went drinking with us, and all these different celebrities. So we were right in the midst of the civil rights movement and the counterculture. I started a newspaper with a bartender named Walter Board. He and I started a newspaper, which is the first underground newspaper, because I had a newspaper in Newark, New Jersey, for a while, and I asked him to design it. He came up with some kind of far out thing. I said, I can't use that. And so he said, why don't we do a newspaper down here? I called it the East Village Other. And Steve Cannon, who's become a legend, If you go to, if you Google his name, Steve Cannon, you'll find a lot of stuff about him in the Times because he was international. But in those days, we didn't have very much money. So he directed us to a Chinese printer and came out with the newspaper, which has become a legend. And Walter, he was recently in the New York Times because he married Peggy Mellon, one of the wealthiest women in the world. So she died recently, but anyway, we parted ways. I wanted to write novels, and he wanted to put the newspaper out. And so I started writing my first novel after I left my newspaper. It was called Freelance Pallbearers. And I met Carla Blank, who was a dancer and a choreographer. And she introduced me to the Japanese and Indian avant-garde. And when we came out to California, we settled in Los Angeles first. Then we came to Berkeley. And in Berkeley, I started magazines with Al Young, the late Al Young, the great writer, and Glenn Miles, who's an artist, and Doyle Foreman, sculptor. And we put out the Yardbird Reader. We published people, Nate Mackey, Harriet Mullen. We were the first ones to publish Intozaki Shangeis for Colored Girls. We published all that. And when the Yardbird broke up, I started my own publication in the 1990s, and we've been in business since then. If you go to Ishmael Reed, if you go to ishmaelreedpub.com, you see our magazine. My daughter took it over. She's managing editor. Now she's managing editor of Tar Baby, which is going to be funded by the Toni Morrison Foundation.
That's coming out.
It'll be out in the spring. We're getting ready to send it to the printers, and it's something that we really need. Uniting the East Coast with the West Coast, because people don't realize we have an active writing scene out here in the West. The traditional place where you find Black literature in the South, in the Midwest, Chicago, and East Washington, New York. But out here, we have the Pacific Rim writers. We have people in Los Angeles. As a matter of fact, Wallace Thurman and Anna Bondsman, doing my research, I found that they had jobs out here and in Los Angeles. Chester Himes is considered, his novel, If He Hollers, is considered the great Los Angeles novel. Because he's down there getting that factory scene in the 1940s down. He started writing in prison. He started getting published in prison. And he lived in my house here in 1981. That summer, he came from Spain where he lived. He lived here, right here in the house. And up in Seattle, we have an alliance with Asian American writers, Chinese American writers, Japanese, all kinds of different cultures. And we built the Before Columbus Foundation, which is almost 50 years old. It'll be 50 years old in 2026.
You told me a story which I thought was really interesting about Blazing Saddles and the book that was kind of taken. Tell us a little bit about that scenario with your involvement in the book that you had and how that was kind of taken.
Yeah, well, not only Blazing Saddles, but Ragtime. But I'll take them one at a time. Richard Pryor came to Berkeley, and in his memoirs, he's always saying that it changed his whole disposition. He mentions me in a very complimentary way. Cecil Brown, who wrote the best novel and best novel about blacks in Hollywood, called Days Without Weather, and also co-wrote, I think, might be Richard Pryor's best film. It's called Which Way Is Up. And so Pryor came out here. We told him he couldn't get away with that corny stuff down that Las Vegas stuff. In those days, we were really, full of ourselves. Man, we on the cut edge, man. You can't do that stuff up here. So it changed his attitude toward comedy. he read my novel, Yellowback Radio Broke Down, which I call a hoodoo western. And the Luke Garou Kid was a star, Black Cowboy and all that. He read it. So when the book came out, a lot of people wanted to buy it, the option for the screenplay or the movie. And one of them was Chuck Barris of the Gong Show. He flew me to Hollywood.
Who was
I thought
supposed
we
to
had.
be in the CIA at some point.
Well, I read that later and explains his attitude because he wanted me to come out to Los Angeles, and at no time did we sit down and discuss the novel or you know. But then I read he was a CIA assassin. But well, the FBI tried to set me up a couple times, but they tried to. Matter of fact, I went to what's his name? Not Nate Mackey, but Yusef Komenyak invited me to Boulder, Colorado for a reading at the university there. And these clean cut guys who came on like counterculture types, they said, well, we got this house here. They want you to spend the night there. So the next morning, he said, you're going back to Oakland. Here's a whole bag of marijuana. I said, I'm not taking no bag of marijuana back to Oakland, okay? When I got to the airport, they took me into a room and, started searching me. I was the only passenger they did this to. And all I had were notebooks and pens because I was writing a review of Muhammad Ali's The Greatest from the New York Times. That's all I had. So they were really disappointed, but I think that was, and there were other occasions.
But tell us again about how your book Yellowback kind of got turned into Blazing Saddles.
Well, Richard Pryor read the novel, and he told Duville Martin, the late Duville Martin, the actor, who was in Rosemary's Baby and some other movies, and Duville told me that he was going to produce it. The Yellowback Radio Broke Down. And that's the last I heard of that. But in the meantime, Ivan Dixon and Quincy Jones wanted it. They wanted to buy an option. Now, another party came and he offered me a whole lot of cash. He said, we'll just give you the cash for the option. I said, no, I'm going to stick with the brothers. And I think that was a good decision because I didn't know how this guy, they take your stuff, they make it into a minstrel show. I've seen that done. They step up here, Quincy Jones, and says he got to back out because his accountant told him that he shouldn't do it. And I thought we had a deal because I went to Quincy Jones' house. He took me to a party at Dionne Warwick's. And there was Dionne Warwick and Bill Russell, all these black stars were there. Ray Brown, the great bassist. I said, boy, we got a deal here. So I was disappointed that he backed out. So there was a young, idealistic filmmaker named Francisco Newman. He was working at KQED TV. He said, I really want this option for this your novel. I want to make it into a movie. And so he bought an option. And his girlfriend, Allison Mills, I published 2 of her books. She said there was a tip-off from the Blazing Saddle studio that somebody told her that they were reading my book and taking and stealing parts of it. I didn't pay any attention to it. So he finally met with Richard Pryor. He had a script, right, Francisco. Richard Pryor said he's going to produce it, but instead he took it to Mel Brooks, and that's how Blazing Saddle came to be. Okay, and luckily for me, I was able to record the theft because Allison wrote a novel, and a novel is about how his option or his script Francisco's script got ripped off. It's called Francisco, and it's become a classic. And as a matter of fact, the the Washington Post uh, covered the reprint. New Directions brought it out a couple of years ago, and Washington Post devoted two whole pages, front page and the rear page, to this novel. So everybody thinks this novel is, but it's about the ripoff. So that's it's recorded, and she sent me letters, which I'm using in my new novel about the ripoff.
Hmm.
Never mess with a writer because you can have the last word. And so in this novel, I see myself as Mel Brooks' slave, and I depict myself as like a secretariat, like a Kentucky Derby horse, like secretariat. And I got Mel Brooks in there. And I say that I made more money for white men than all of the Kentucky Derby winners combined. Because Dr. O, he heard me read from my novel, Mumbo Jumbo, which I call my ragtime novel at Sarah Lawrence, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when the excerpt of his novel came out, I wrote him a postcard. I said, I'm glad you liked my book. And then when the complete novel was published, people from Europe and the United States noticed the similarity. And so I think he got really paranoid about it. So I met him at a party. And afterwards, we went to a restaurant. He says, that thing you sent me, that postcard? He still remembers the postcard. He said, it's so full, that stuff's BS. I say, a lot of people agree with me. And I cited all the people like Bill Marcus, wrote in the Village Voice, said it was a scandal that his novel was published. So he's made about $100 million. So if I say I've earned these white men $200 million, then I've earned more for them than maybe all the slaves that Thomas Jefferson hired in his lifetime.
Well,
At least I got a sense of humor about it.
well, again, one of the great things, and we talked about this before about the media, is to allow for people to understand the genius and creativity that we have that no one talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many other things that I know that you were involved in, and the music. Matter of fact, I know that, and I don't know whether we were able to receive the piece that you did about Nikki Giovanni, and who was a good friend of yours, and there's some interesting stories that you tell about that relationship, and in her passing, how you did some things with her. And most of the people who we see, as we had talked before, came out. When I say we see black artists like the Sidney Poitiers and Ruby Dees and Arthur Davis and Harry Belafonte, they all came out of the similar type of groups. The little theater in Harlem, what you were doing in the Village, what happened in California. But those stories, you are some of the few people who are still around that can talk about that. And I think that it's important to have you documented to allow for people to know who Ishmael Reed is, but also to support you. You have a new play that's coming up.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Shine.
Well,
Doing Fine.
Yeah, we're talking about how there's a effort to stamp out black literature. They've been very successful in stamping out the storytelling of some Native American tribes. So it can happen. There are stories that have been exterminated by the invasion. So I see myself as a preservationist, something I learned from the Native Americans in Alaska, where I became honorary member of the Wolf Clan. That's a long story. That they revere their elders. These kids around here, I tell them, don't grab all the stuff off the lemon tree. I'll give you the lemons. They'll tell me to go F myself. Little kids, little black kids. So it's great to go to a culture where the elders are considered tradition bearers. They know the stories. They know the history. And so I see myself as a preservationist. And so what's happening is that our stories are being eliminated through assimilation. I mean, we're lucky to have had people like Zora Neale Hurston, who went to these coal mines and other places and wrote down the stories that she heard there, or Elaine Locke, who recommended that blacks, black writers use folklore as a source, and that's what we try to do. And we're talking about the black arts in the 1960s. One of the great documents is Black Fire, edited by Amiri Baraka and Larry Neal. Larry Neal was a genius of the Black Arts movement, the great philosopher of the Black Arts movement. And he wrote a manifesto in Black Fire, and shine swam on. And shine swam on. In other words, we should return to the oral tradition and forget about this imitation. Now, I know everybody loves James Baldwin, but James Baldwin was an imitator, and there were writers who wrote as well as he. I mean, I think Louise Meriwether probably wrote the best Harlem novel. Daddy was a number runner, but he had good connections. He had to mow down everybody to get to the top. He had to jump on Richard Wright. He had to jump on Langston Hughes. He had to jump on Chester Hines. I mean, there are a whole lot of casualties that led him to the top. And then when he betrayed them, the New York literary establishment, they paid him back. Now, you see, I saw something that Daryl Pinckney wrote a very nice piece in the New York Review of Books about James Baldwin. Not this issue, probably the last issue. He left out Baldwin's most important novel, Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone, where he bites the hand that feeds him. And he got paid back. Because in this novel, he satirizes the head of the actor studio, because they messed with his play, Booth Mr. Charlie. And so he takes his revenge and Tell Me How Long the Train's Been. Lee Strasberg was the head of the actor studio, and he makes him look like a fool in this novel. And he makes some of the other associates look like fools because they messed up his play. He said they messed it up so that he wanted to commit suicide, right? They paid him back. They did a hatchet job on him in the New York Times Book Review, the family publication. And they hired Mario Puzo, who did The Godfather, to do the hatchet job. And they replaced him with Eldridge Cleaver. That's how that came about. So we know how they operate, and they were imitators. Baldwin imitated Henry James. Think about his brother, William James. Henry James, who was a bigot, anti-Semite, a phony Anglo. He's Irish, but he pretended to be Anglo and all that kind of stuff. And he imitated him so well that Henry James' son sent him a portrait of his father. Then you have some of the other authors, like Ralph Ellison, imitating Hemingway and T.S. Eliot. You get to our generation, and Larry Neal says, and shine swam on. And people say, well, how can you put down Ellison? Well, he's right. I mean, you really have to be a scholar, somebody spending a lot of time to know all the factors that Ellison is discussing in Invisible Man, which is a fine novel. But he hated the people, not hated them, but he opposed the younger writers. And so I asked him when I interviewed him, I said, well, how many of these young writers have you read? He hadn't read any of them. His whole position was to keep down the upcoming talent that might be competitive with him. I got a nice prize. I got a good prize at National Institute of Arts and Letters, 1971 or something like that. We had this, people on the canopies and all the who's who of American music and the arts, we all having lunch. Ellison comes up to me all drunk. He says, Ishmael Reed, you ain't nothing but a gangster and a con artist. And I'm thinking, well, who's the gangster and the con artist? He coasted along on one novel. But anyway, that's one of the reasons I left New York, because of the suicide and suicide, or all this, all the competition that goes on between the black
Tell
writers.
us about Shine, because we got about 15
Okay,
minutes, and
well, Shine,
I want you to get that in.
yeah, well, Shine is you're not gonna let me settle the scores, okay? They
I
said
mean,
that
we
goes
can always
Ishmael
have a
Reed,
part
that
two,
goes Ishmael Reed settling scores. But anyway,
because I love
uh,
the stories. The stories are,
the only
great.
painting on the wall of my uncle's house in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in the early 40s, late 30s, was a picture of the Titanic. I never knew that. I said, where's that? Around 1912, there arose a, nobody knows where it came from, a rap called Shine Swam On.
Shine,
And
shine,
there are
you're
many
doing
versions
fine.
of this, many versions of it. Langston Hughes wrote the lyrics down in 1965. And I've taken those 35 lines and I expanded it into about a 100-page script. But it takes on a lot of subjects. But it's about a black man who's a stoker who worked in the boiler room of the Titanic. No such, it's all made up. He noticed that the boat is leaking water. And he goes to the captain, and the captain at my research, the captain was called the millionaire's captain, the real captain, and he got drunk a lot. As a matter of fact, some people say that the thing got sank and ran an iceberg because he's all drunk. I found a letter from one of the survivors saying, the captain's out in the saloon and all the people, he's taking over the running of the ship. But anyway, the captain says, no, this is an industrial marvel, I mean, a miracle. I mean, even God couldn't sink this ship. What are you talking about, black man? So ship's taking on more water. Next thing we know, Shine is jumped overboard and began to swim toward Harlem. Okay, everybody talk about Afrofuturism like it's a new thing. He make this Shine legend mixes with all kind of talent. Sugar Ray Robinson, the 1950s, 1912, it's all mixed up. Afrofuturism, not a new thing. And so these bankers and rich people and rich women and everything are on the ship up there begging him to save them. And they're offering him sex and money and all kinds of wives to
Shine,
save.
shine, can you help me? I can give
And they
you
say,
this.
Shine,
Shine,
shine, save for
shine.
me. One of them said, and he tells them, get your behind, I'll edit this out, get your behind in the water and swim like me. And it ends with the Shine in a bar in Harlem telling his story.
And one of the my favorites, and it always comes back to mind, is that when Shine was telling all of them that they couldn't do it. I don't know how that, the rhyme that I remember is that when he jumped in the water, uh, a shark was behind him, and the shark said, "Shine, shine, you're doing fine, but you missed one stroke, and your ass is mine." And Shine looked back and said, "You may be king of the ocean, you may be king of the sea, but you gonna have to be a swimming MF if you don't eat me."
Well, we have Maurice Carlton playing the shark, and we have Rome who's directing the play, playing the polar bear. So what I try to do is recreate the North Atlantic scene,
Right.
the seabirds and all that. And so they have lines. And the plot of the play is that Shine is on trial. So we got a judge and a prosecutor. The judge is played by Raj Scott, who's in a number of our plays. And the only witnesses on behalf of Shine are the polar bear and the shark.
And the shark.
Yeah.
And he's on trial because he didn't save all the people. He just jumped in the
Yeah,
water.
well, he's charged with sinking the ship, causing the ship to sink. And the captain says, well, he must have had something to do with it. He's the only black man on board. And there was a rumor that Jack Johnson was denied passage on the Titanic. Never
Jack
happened.
Johnson?
Yeah, that's a lie that Lead Belly and them told. Lead Belly has Jack Johnson on. We play Lead Belly's music in the play, and when it said when Jack Johnson heard that the Titanic had sunk, uh, he did a little Eagle Rock dance. So if you go to YouTube, you'll see Jack Johnson doing the Eagle Rock dance. So we had a lot of fun with this, and we're opening.
Tell us where it's going to be, what the site is that people can get information, and how long it's going to run.
Okay, we're opening on January 30th, and we're closing on February 16th.
Mm-hmm.
And the performances are Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 8 p.m., and Sunday at 3 p.m. And it's be held at the Theater for the New City, which is at 155 First Avenue. And for more information, you can call 212-254-1109. 212-254-1109. And the website
212-254-1109.
And the website is Theater for the New City, all one word, theaterforthenewcity.net.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, when you talk about, legends such as yourself, there could be 3 or 4 shows like this because there's so many stories about so many people that we have read about, and to talk to someone who actually interfaced with them and kind of can tell you the real deal about who they are.
Well, I'm able to set the record straight because if you look at some of my articles, like the one in the New York Review of Books, I challenge all the myths about the Black Arts movement because they got people listed under Black Arts who didn't belong to it, had nothing to do with it, and some of the pioneers like Askia Torre, Larry Neal, and people like that are not mentioned.
Mm. Yeah. And music, speaking, before we let you go, you have a piece that you just developed, composed about Nikki Giovanni. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we're all, associating with one another, downtown, uptown, all over, writing for magazines and going to parties together and, learning from each other. And Nikki was a key member, although she got into difficulty for attending a reception with some of the apartheid people. She was severely criticized for that. When she went to South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
she appeared before these Afrikaners. And I think Michael Harper and Amiri criticized her. But that means she put out a lot of work. And, we were all from Tennessee. She's from Tennessee. She's from Knoxville, I believe. The great poet Calvin Herndon was from Chattanooga, and I'm from Chattanooga. As a matter of fact, the mayor's bringing me down to Chattanooga in March, and I'm being declared the Emeritus Poet Laureate of Chattanooga, the city where I was born. I had to go all over the world to go back to Chattanooga to get some kind of Poet Laureate position.
Just like the college that you dropped out of brought you back and gave you a doctorate, right?
Yeah, they gave me, and maybe alumni of the year. How you like that? So anyway.
But the piece, tell us about it. The music, is it something that's going to be available? Or what are you going to do with the?
Well, I have let's see, 2 CDs out that you can get on Spotify, Amazon. 3 CDs. One just came out where I performed with the legendary blues musicians out here in Oakland with my original blues lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
featuring David Murray, great tenor saxophonist,
Mm-hmm.
and Ronnie Stewart. But these are old timers. Some of them are young, who make up some of the legendary blues scene out here in Oakland.
Right.
I have a CD called Hands of Grace, where I present some of my original tunes, and I'm accompanied by the great flautist, Roger Glenn, and my spouse, Carla Blanco on violin, and I played the piano. And this year, uh, there will be a CD entitled "The Jazz Marbles," which was the music was and the poem was broadcast all over the world by the BBC. It's only in the United States where it can't get published, but anyway, all over the world by the BBC. And that will be produced by the Reading Group. So the Reading Group did Hands of Grace, and they're going to do the Jazz Martyrs,
Hmm.
and maybe another CD, which will include Remembering Nikki, which I recently composed. What happened to me was I accidentally stumbled into the idea of composing music because we try to save money for one of our plays, and so I composed the music for it, and I've been composing ever since, and I continue. I just did a concerto called Chattanooga Street for my home going down there.
Hmm.
So
Well,
I can't read. I can't read the stuff that I compose. So I have it transcribed. I get a real concert pianist or somebody to play it.
well, I mean, and and lastly, I didn't ask you about this when we were talking before. You did a thing with Obama,
Mhm.
uh, and I think it was something. It was kind of I forget the title of it, but it was a piece about Obama and some sort of switch or some sort of. I'm trying to bring it back. I wrote it down, but I couldn't find it. But you did something about.
I wrote a book. I wrote a book about the opponents of Obama
Yes, I
and
think that may be.
how they were treating him differently from the way they would treat a white president. That was easy.
Right. You know, so if you want to find more about Ishmael Reed, I mean, you can Google him. He's all over that. Um, you can go to Amazon. A lot of his stuff is there. Um, but
Yeah,
more important,
the title of the book was controversial because I call it um, Barack Obama and the Nigger Breakers,
that was what, yeah.
and some stores didn't carry it. But I had in mind Philby, the guy that tried to discipline Frederick Douglass, who tried to break Frederick Douglass, and Frederick Douglass fought back.
Yeah.
And you talk about the N word, they jump on Mark Twain for using the N word, but Frederick Douglass uses it about 16 times. I guess they don't read Frederick Douglass.
Well, again, Ismail Reed, at some point, we have to have you back because we haven't touched even a bit of all of the stuff that you've done over the years. And the stuff that you've done should be recorded so that people can understand and many of the things that they've experienced. Many of the poets, many of the musicians, much of the writing, how you influence so much, whether it's in the movies, whether, it's through elected officials, all of those types of things. And your name, as you were saying, some artists who do things are not necessarily promoted, but that's why Soul City and shows like this are important because we have to learn to create our own narrative. We have to make our own heroes. We have to be able to put our own people who we look to be in the our ancestors, and I am so glad to have had the opportunity to talk with you, Mr. Reed. And it's Ismail, not Israel. It's Ismail Reed, and we need to talk again.
Well, Tony, thanks a lot. I have a sort of like edge over some of the other writers because I have wide outlets. So my latest piece about the election, which I couldn't get published here, was published in El País, the Spanish newspaper, and where I say that the reason that uh, Kamala lost was because Trump and Vance depicted her as a whore. That's why she lost.
Not to mention being a black
That's right.
Asian
And
and
married to a
married
Jew.
to a Jew
Right.
and and a woman.
Yeah. So you're not going to get that in the New York Times columns. Matter of fact, they're beginning to embrace Trump, if you notice.
But your wealth of information, my brother. I'm glad I was able to capture a little bit of you to let people know who you are, and again, shine. The theater. What's the name of the theater again?
It's a theater for the new city.
The Theater of the New City. Too.
And you can find it at theaterforthenewcity.net. N-E-T.
Theater for
All
the
the
New,
information.
one word, the Theater for the New City.net, or you can call 212-254-1109. But
And we're opening January 30th.
January 30th.
I'm going to New York for the first week.
Okay. Well, hopefully I'll get a chance to see you. I'll call you and find, when you're going to go to the show. Maybe I'll come with you. Just
That would be great. That would be excellent.
to hang out and get some more knowledge. I mean, well, that's what happens, man. That's what we have. I'm actually in Ghana. I'll be leaving next week.
Oh, great.
And they
Great.
look at me as an ancestor. So they like to tell stories about what really is Harlem about. What is, because they don't know, just as we don't know about what's happening
Right.
in Africa.
Right.
We even in what we call quote unquote black literature, it still doesn't tell you what the real deal is.
Right.
And as you know, you can't say certain things. So anyway, thanks, and we'll talk again. I'll give you I'll send you some pictures from Ghana. Maybe one day we can
That'd
get
be
you
great.
to go there.
That'd be great, Tony.
And that's it for today. We probably will play this again during Black History Month. I think that's going to be important. I'll talk with Soul City to rerun this because you're going to be there from February to February what?
I'll be there from January 20th to February 3rd, actually.
Okay,
But
so
I'll be 87 next month.
well, you got 10 years on me, brother, so I can learn a lot from you. Thank you so much, and
Thank
that
you, Tony.
pretty much ends. I might even gone over a little bit. I get excited when I'm talking to people like
Well,
this.
thank you very much, Tony. I appreciate it.
This is again Soul City. Thanks, Matt and Jasmine, for all your technical work to get us on without echoes and everything. And that's probably about it.
Okay.
Thank you, my brother. I would definitely contact you when you're in New York. At least, to shake your hand and
Great.
maybe even sit with you with the play.
Tell me when you're coming. We'll get you some comps.
You tell me when I should be there, and in January, and I will definitely be there.
Sounds great.
Just let me know.
Okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Take care.
That's right.
And
Take
that's
care.
it.
This is Kier Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.